Hello, everyone. It's my first time in India. Yay. So I'm very excited to be here, and thank you all for coming to my talk. So a little bit about me. As she introduced, I'm currently the design research lead at GovTech, Government Digital Services, or GDS for short. But I've pretty much been in the service line most of my life. I went to hospitality school, and then I didn't like wearing the uniform, so I left. And then I worked in a different bunch of industries. And I stumbled upon user experience in 2005, and then really started working in the industry from 2007. So yeah, I've been quite lucky. I started as a generalist, and then moved on to specialize in research over the last 6 years. What I'm currently doing at GDS is not so much the delivery of work, of products and services, but building a practice and a team. And there's this term called glue work that I found online, and it's really all the invisible stuff that helps designers and researchers and product people understand their citizens or their users better. So there's some stuff about the craft. There's operational layers, like what are the progression pathways for designers and researchers. And also like the emotional resilience. I think we don't really often talk about that at work. You know, what is the well-being like for our teams? So in the next 25 minutes or so, I will try and cover 3 questions. The first one is, what do I mean by listening when I say listening inwards? Have I really been good at listening myself? And then how can we all try to expand our listening to be a better designer? And by designer, I mean like you can be a designer or a researcher, but you could also be a product person or a developer, you know, or a product manager. So anyone that works in the design of a product or service. Okay. So how I see listening is like a lamp, right? And there are 2 parts of the lamp. The first part is attention. And this is where you shine the lamp on to something so that you can give it the full attention. And then there's also awareness, where something that used to be in the dark, and then you shine the lamp onto it so that it gives it more light. And you might have heard terms like being present and being mindful. So that's related to attention and awareness as well, right? So when I talk about listening, it's not so much hearing the words, but attention and awareness. And the idea for this talk really came about from my own reflection of my own journey in my career. So thankfully, over the years, my skills and knowledge have increased. But when I started looking at my health and my emotions, the line kind of looks like this. It's a bit of a roller coaster, and I see some of you smiling, and I wonder if you're also going through the same kind of roller coaster as myself. Right? So yes, I have burnt out 3 times in my career for different reasons, pushing myself too hard, getting all excited about this new craft, not being able to say no, being very excited and trying to do a lot of things, and yeah, so yeah, the idea for the talk really comes from that, and reflecting back on my past and how can I maybe try to help other people to listen better. So I've kind of distilled it down to about 6 areas that we can listen to, and then we talk about listening in UX. The most obvious layer is people, right? Because we need to talk to users, we need to talk to our stakeholders. So outwards listening is important. But we are designers, and we are also human, and we have thoughts and emotions as well, right? And these will affect how we are as a designer at work and what we bring into work. And then if you go even further deeper, there are things like our body, how we spend our time, and how we listen to ourselves that also affect how we bring ourselves into work. Okay? So I'll go into each of these a little bit. So listening to people. I'm going to tell a story of what happened to me last year. So I was sitting at my desk, I was trying to rush a deadline, and then the project manager comes over and says like, hey, Sam, there's this project coming up in Canada, and Penguin is my nickname for this colleague. In case you're wondering, it's not the Batman penguin, not a real penguin either. So like, it seems like Penguin is available. Can we maybe send her to Toronto to do the research? And I was like, I'm trying to do my deadline. Can you go away? But I also want to help her. So I said, okay, let's just talk for 10 minutes. But what was really happening was I wasn't paying attention to her, right? Because my head is just stuck in my deadline, my report. I'm thinking about all the things in my head. I'm not really paying attention to her. And so I'm kind of multitasking in that way. And then because I wanted to finish the conversation, I keep cutting her off. And I was like, just trying to get my point across, trying to say, like, find a solution so that we can finish this, and then, like, I can go back to my work. And then at the same time, I'm starting to think ahead, like, what the solution will be, and, like, from a very logistical point of view. Like, yes, she finishes this project there, and then, like, the flight is this long, and then, it should be able to fit, right? But what was really happening was I was doing these listening sins. Right? These are some of the sins, right? Yeah, I was multitasking, I was interrupting, and I was forecasting. And actually, there was even more serious sin here, which is I didn't ask Penguin what she wanted. I made the decision on behalf of her because I was too busy trying to solve my own problem of finishing the conversation. And there's this quote: most people do not listen with the intent to understand, they listen with the intent to reply, right? And I see a lot of nodding heads too. So we're always already forming our answers, forming our rebuts whenever we are in a conversation, right? So I wouldn't really give you any answers in this talk. I think more of like reflective questions for yourself, in thinking, how can you listen better in a conversation? So if you can't talk now, how can you find your own ways to say, sorry, I cannot talk to you now without being rude? If you are going into a conversation, how can you try to clear the headspace or try to be more present and give that person your full attention? And if instead of interrupting, maybe use clarifying or paraphrasing as your way in instead. Like, oh, this is what I'm hearing. Can I clarify if this is what you mean? Okay. And then often if we talk about work in a very functional layer, but can we try to understand where the other person is coming from? What are they afraid of? What are they concerned about? When a client rejects your work or the way you structure the report, maybe he's actually really worried about making a bad impression with his boss. So what is his boss actually concerned about? And can you try to understand more so that you can also help your client or your colleague look good? Okay. And then we go a little deeper into our thoughts and emotions. Here's how I think thoughts are like. They are the laser and we are the cat. Right? And can you imagine like the number of thoughts we have in our heads and the number of cats chasing lasers in our head? Laser cat, and trying to sleep at night, and all these laser cats running around chasing your own tail, right? And the problem with this is that over a matter of time, we then start to get tired and grumpy and like, oh, I don't feel like going to work anymore. Right? And that's not great, right? Because then we might not really care about our colleagues or care about our users anymore. So why do we chase lasers? I think our thoughts are really shaped by things like our values, our upbringing, social norms, and the kind of biases that we have that often affect how we perceive a situation. So for example, like, oh, I thought they said this because they did this, or I assumed this was the case when, when that situation happened. Oh, nobody texted me before my talk, so nobody cares. Things like that, right? They all create these like crazy stories in your head, and then they start to drive you a bit nuts. And then they fester in your heart, and over time, they might become even more dangerous emotions, like anger. What's the other one that I was going to say? Resentment, right? Or even sometimes hate. So what we can do is try to slow the cat, right? Instead of having the thought and the emotion and the immediate reaction, you want to try and increase the space between the thought, the emotion, and the action. So something like this. Okay? You want to give yourself the time and space so that you can either unpack different emotions or let the emotion go down in degree so that it becomes not as intense. And you also want to try and diverge on what are the possible actions that you can take place besides the first one that you thought of, which is to go and punch your colleague. Right? So what other ways can you try to resolve that situation? And then form the response in a more calmer manner. Right? So some things you can do to slow the cat. You can try counting. You can think about numbers. You can think about your favorite thing to eat. You can try to leave the building. I'm going to buy coffee. Go away. I don't want to talk to you now. No, seriously, don't say go away. Or you can say just delay the response. Let me think about this. I'll get back to you later. Right? I need time to think about this. And don't let people pressure you into responding straight away. Try. Okay. And what it really is can we try to see other possibilities besides our own beliefs? Right? This is a story about the elephant and the 6 blind men. Right? So sometimes we are only seeing one side of the elephant, and maybe our colleagues can also see other sides of the elephant. So instead about who is right or who is wrong, can we have a discussion around the different sides of the elephant and say like, okay, yeah, actually, I don't agree, and or maybe this is not my view, but I acknowledge that yes, this could be the case. Okay? And then build up a collective shared understanding rather than arguing with each other. So the next time some of these situations happen to you, consider how you will react. When someone is nasty to you, when someone rejects your idea, or like your design is stupid, or like your design is terrible, maybe there's a lot of work and you have to work late again and again and again. How are you responding in that kind of situation? Okay, and then we go now into our body. So body was one of the hardest things for me to pay attention to because I never really gave it any thought. Right? And I'm not really talking about exercising, but just how well do you know your body? How well do you communicate with your body and understand like where the aches are coming from? Why is my stomach hurting whenever I go into a meeting? And things like that. Okay. But really at the fundamental layer, how do we wear our emotions in our body? When you're stressed and when you're upset, do you lash out? Do you really go and punch your colleague? Or do you hunch your shoulders without even realizing it, as I did? Or do you slump down under your table? Or do you go and hide in the toilet for 1 hour and hope nobody finds you? Right? It's like, oh, presentation is coming, I'm just going to hide in the toilet and hope someone will take over, right? Yeah. So how do you wear your emotions? And here's a story about actually 2 different colleagues, one in my first UX job and one in my previous UX company. And what was happening was every time they are stressed, they will sigh. And it's not like, but, and they sigh a lot. For this colleague, it was like every 15 seconds she would be sighing, and it got so bad that I had to draw this sigh-o-meter to show her, hey, do you know actually this is how much you're sighing in 1 week? Right? And it's funny when it just happens within our team because it's like, oh, he's at it again or she's at it again. But what if you're doing this in front of clients, in front of stakeholders, and you don't even realize it and nobody has told you? You know, like what kind of impression that would give to the people that you're working with? Like, oh no, is it me? Did I cause stress? Is the project too tough for them? Did I hire the wrong people? Right? So you want to be more aware of how you wear your emotions. So some things to think about. We work in teams. We don't do design together. So can we also help each other to look out for our emotions? And I'm calling this human mirrors. Okay. So we all have blind spots that we cannot see. So can we ask a close friend or a close colleague at work to say like, hey, you know, I think there's something here, or if you see something that I always do, can you please tell me? Even if it's awkward, it's okay. Yeah. Can you then also turn your awareness into yourself and see like, okay, how can I practice detecting early signs of stress? Like for me, it's to stop cooking. So if I start taking away a lot of food, or I just start eating at the sofa lying down, like you know, you can eat potato chips lying down, then I know like, okay, something is wrong and I need to start doing something to correct that. Okay, and then we may think that, oh, as designers, we don't need to think about our physical strength, but it is the container that holds us up, even if we are sitting at the desk every day. So how can we develop our strength and our mobility? Okay, and then we go down into time. So I never really noticed time until my third burnout. One day I happened to read this article by Wait But Why, and he talks about breaking your day into 100 10-minute blocks, okay, to see how you're spending your time. And I was like, okay, 100 is too much. So I'm just going to break it down into 15-minute blocks to cover the whole day. And this is what it looked like. I love Excel, so it's in Excel. And even though I was actually doing this physically, I was embodying that experience for a good year, it never really hit me until I saw it visualized this way. I was like, oh shit. I'm spending a lot of time at work, and then the moment I get back, I only have energy to just lie down and watch Netflix or whatever pirated site you guys use here. Right? So it's Netflix, work, and then because I don't really want to go back to work, then I stay up late to watch more Netflix, hoping that the work thing will just magically disappear. But yeah, so it's a very tough life. And only after I did this, and then I started, deciding like, okay, I need, how can I better use my time to take better care of myself? And this is what it looks like now in the last month. It's not perfect. There are some weekends where I will still watch a lot of Netflix. But the good thing is that I am trying to sleep more, and I'm trying to do more of the things on the right-hand side that are important to me or that are good to me. All the blue and yellow stuff, right? Like reading, reflecting, journaling, meditating, exercising, cooking, hanging out with friends, instead of just shutting myself away at home. So some things for you to think about. How can you better spend your time? I know this is an Asian culture and work never really stops, and we have smartphones now, and WhatsApp. Oh my God, work has invaded WhatsApp, right? But you can choose how you respond to all these things. What are the boundaries that you can set for yourself and say, like, okay, up to this time, maybe 8 o'clock, it's fine. After that, I'll just leave it for the next day. Or like, it's okay to stay late sometimes, but I don't want to make it a habit and stay late every day, right? So set that for yourself. Which also means that if you're doing the work, then you have to be more disciplined at saying like, okay, I have 5 hours to do this. I am going to just spend 5 hours to do this, which then trains you to think, how can I do my work in that 5 hours more effectively, which can sometimes lead you to diverge on other possible ways, right? I mean, we all want to do a good job, and we all want to deliver quality work, but at what cost, right? And actually, can you deliver work that is just good enough in 5 hours, and then go back home and play computer games or whatever that makes you happy? Can you try to spend your days creating personal value for yourself, right? At the end of the day, work is just work, right? How are you using work to develop new skills? And how are you spending your days to do the things that make you happy? Hobbies, family, whatever it is, right? We only have one life, This computer game doesn't reload. Right? And then if you're a senior in the team, if you're a senior in the company, can we try to lead by example by leaving on time or not messaging the team after a certain time? Yes, you might have things you forget, then just put it in a notepad and then set a reminder for yourself and then send it in the morning, or I don't know, send a delayed email or something. Okay. And then we come down into ourselves, which is the deepest and probably the hardest layer, I think, because what we really are the snowmen. And we are living in the snow globe with all this glitter around, and the glitter represents all our distractions in life, right? Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, What else? LinkedIn, and then we have work, and then we have Netflix, and then we have computer games, and books, and articles, and oh my gosh, I still have to write the Medium blog post. So many things to do in life, right? But do you really let yourself be quiet so that you can try to remember what is it about yourself that makes you unique? And what is it about yourself that you wanted to achieve when you were younger that you might have forgotten? Okay. So yeah, I would really encourage you to try to find ways to carve some time for yourself, even if you start with 5 minutes at the end of the day before you sleep, and try to increase that over time. Right? Think about what are your tendencies like? Like for myself, I tend to be very easily excited. So every time there's something new, I'll say, like, oh, can I be part of this? This is very interesting. Can I come and support you? So I have learned to recognize that is what's happening, and I have learned to stop myself from doing that until I've had much more time to think about whether it is really what I want to do. Think about what's really driving you as you push yourself so hard in life and in work. For myself, it was failure, and I think this is again another Asian tough love thing. Trying to show to your parents that I'm not a failure, I'm not your screwed up daughter, I did achieve something in life, and look at me, right? And yeah, it just made me work so hard to the point where I burnt out 3 times. And then, what are your hopes and dreams that you had when you were young, as I mentioned before? And are they still valid? Do you still want to chase them? How can you close the gap between now and then? Okay, so when we started this, I had this in a line, right? It was like quite a linear thing, but as you can see, it's all kind of interconnected, right? So I would encourage you to try and listen better. Not just to improve your craft and the way that you try to understand users and stakeholders, but also in how you work together with each other, and also how you can be more self-aware and to take better care of yourself. Because life is not about this balance. Balance is so hard. The moment something on the other side tips, you fall off, right? But there will always be ups and downs in life, no matter what happens. Right? It will always go up, and then it will go down, and sometimes it will go up, 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 and then it might go down very badly. Right? And what you're really trying to do is to know what's going on quickly, so you can iterate, and then you can correct. Right? So that you don't get this big crash. But you have small ways instead, a gentler way of living life and of doing the work. So that you can continue making change. I mean, that's what we're all in the user experience for, I think, to try and make the world a better place. But design is a long game, and it is sometimes like climbing a mountain. Okay? Not only are you climbing the mountain yourself, you also have to bring your stakeholders along with you. People who have no idea what design is about, and they're like, "Huh, you want me to climb this mountain with you?" So you have to be present, right? Not just for yourself, but also for the people that you're trying to create transformation for, digital transformation, business transformation. It's all climbing mountains. And finally, I'll leave you with this, and this is a quote I wish I knew very much earlier in my career, right? Because I was all about changing the world, but not about changing myself. Okay? And the last reflection that I'll leave you with, how will you try to listen to yourself differently from today, from tonight, or from tomorrow? So Tanyavad, thank you for listening.
Know more about the gray block. What do you exactly mean by being human?
Oh, okay, so the question is, what do I mean by being human? Eating, showering, going to the toilet, buying groceries, doing my laundry, All these little things that add up in sustaining myself as a physical human being. Yeah, and sometimes those things take more time than others. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So, you talked about listening into your own ideas and spending some time listening to others, like reading or something like that. But you also spoke about journaling. So, how do you think it helps you? How much do you think you should listen in, and how much you should produce as an output? Because you also have work, and then you're talking about your personal aspirations and dreams. So, what do you think should be the ratio?
Okay, so the question is the ratio of listening for work and listening to yourself. Okay. I think there is there's no right ratio for everyone. It is really what works best for yourself at that point in time. For example, if you don't really have much practice listening to yourself, then you want to try and do more of it, right? It could be like having quiet time, it could be writing or journaling. But for someone who is more self-aware, then you don't really need to do as much of that. It could be just half an hour meditation, could be good enough for that person. Yeah. So try and find your own balance. Yeah. And it will change as you go along the journey. Yeah. There's a question there.
So you talked about listening to your colleagues and when they come to you and the responses that you give back immediately when you're listening. So my question is more about, so when someone comes up to you and you're talking about work and you're working in a team, so sometimes you have to listen to individually to people and not just in a team. So people end up bringing their own baggage and other people's baggage in that conversation. And suddenly, since we're also very sensitive when we're talking about design and we're talking about one particular process, a lot of wounds get open perhaps, a lot of, it becomes heated for no reason. And how would you suggest or advise on how to be more proactive and not provocative in that conversation?
That's a good question, I think, because you're always in the group discussions, right? So what can you do? So it might be very potentially very tense. But why does the conversation only start when you're all together? How well do you really understand your colleagues? Do you take the opportunity to talk to them outside of meetings to really know what are their fears, their challenges? Design is really 70% conversations, really. So I would encourage you to have those conversations outside so that when you actually go to the meetings, it's not like everyone's starting from scratch and you're trying to build the relationship from there.
That's true, but I'm saying there's someone is nodding their head in the meeting and then coming out and being completely, disagreed with the idea. They were not able to express themselves and their frustration then continues on in their work as well.
Yeah.
So you have the conversations outside, of course.
Yeah.
You take them out and be like, okay, here's a cup of tea, talk about it. But to really, be able to be in the same plane. If you're not happy with it, you should be able to say it in the group so that everyone is aware and they're listening to you. So that's the, crux of it.
I think that's ideal, right? But we also try to understand that speaking up can be hard for people. It takes a lot emotionally. If you're not used to speaking up, it can be a very scary thing. So if you see this in other people, in your colleagues, how can we try to encourage them to speak out? It's a lot of things, right? It's facilitation skills as the person trying to run the meeting. It's also encouragement and helping our team to grow in that area. So it might be a simple thing like, hey, Zeke was my ex-colleague, you've been quite quiet. What do you think? Do you have any thoughts on what we've been discussing? It's just something simple like that can be often very helpful. Yeah, to get that kind of habit going. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Last question, is it? Okay.
Yeah, so when you were talking about being excited to learn everything. So I think I also face the same problem that I end up wanting to learn everything, and then there's a big stack behind which I'm not able to finish my work because of because I want to learn everything. So that's a very big problem that I face. So anything that you can suggest on that?
I think it's a very common challenge, especially when we're just starting out, right? Because there's so many fields in user experience design. And I have found that focusing on one or two for that year can help you learn more rather than trying to cover so much of everything. So like, can you make this year the year of interaction design, and then next year you focus on maybe information architecture or whatever it is. That's not to say that you don't continue reading widely, but don't feel like you need to dive into all the little rabbit holes. And you have to force yourself to be focused and to not get carried away, because otherwise you'll just see it as a chore and you're like, oh, I don't want to deal with this anymore. Yeah, hope that helps.